So in this video, we are going to look at how new sports facilities that are built in cities impact fans. And so we're going to look at the benefits to fans from these new stadiums. So in general, new stadiums, arenas, whatever you want to call them, depending on what sport you're looking at, do lead to increases in attendance in the years following their construction. And so, for example, the Baltimore Orioles and Cleveland Indians saw their average attendances rise by 40 and 31% respectively in the first year that Oriole Park at Camden Yards and Progressive Field were completed. So that's a pretty big increase. But what ends up happening over time is that the novelty of those new stadiums tends to fade. So attendance at Oriole Park and Progressive Field have fallen significantly in recent years as the Orioles and Indians, who had good teams around the time of construction, fielded worse teams on average over time. So the honeymoon effect, that honeymoon effect of a new stadium has received a lot of attention over time, with a lot of studies looking at the impact, especially of baseball teams, than on other sports. And it's found that baseball attendance tends to increase on average by about 1/3 after. Now, the reason why the impact is greater on baseball than on football, basketball, and hockey is because the other three sports are more likely to sell out, whereas with baseball, you can usually get tickets to a game at any given game. Okay. So this has happened. Now, with baseball especially, there have even been cases where you've seen decreases in attendance with the new stadium. For example, the New York Yankee Stadium, which opened in 2009, opened at a point when the economy was doing very poor, and they had raised their ticket prices substantially. And so there were a lot of empty seats when the Yankees' new stadium was built. Now, new stadiums do affect all ticket prices, but the biggest impact and biggest trend to talk about is when it comes to luxury boxes and other seating. Okay. So up until the Astrodome opened in 1965, no modern stadium had any luxury boxes. Okay. So luxury boxes are seats that are separate from all the other seats. It's almost like it's a separate room. And in addition to the seats, a lot of times they will have things like couches in there, areas to walk around, private bathrooms at times, and so forth. Okay. Now, since the 1960s, luxury boxes and other premium seatings have become a big part of the contemporary sports facilities. Now, with the NFL in particular, much of the ticket revenue is split among all the teams. Okay. However, what happens is the teams end up splitting a lot of they don't split the revenue from the luxury boxes, because with the luxury boxes, a small portion of what gets paid is for the actual seat, whereas the rest of it is for other amenities such as concessions. So what has happened over time is that as these new stadiums have been built, more and more luxury boxes were built with them. And so if we look at this table here, which has the market value of the different teams, okay, and then when the stadiums were opened, and then luxury boxes. Okay. And I can't remember which year this is as of, but so if you look at some of them, you'll see that a lot of the more profitable teams, a lot of teams with the higher market value, directly coincide with the number of luxury boxes that they have. And again, the reason why is that these luxury boxes allow the teams to keep a larger portion of the revenue that they bring in from the sales. So there have been kind of two broad periods of new stadium building that we're going to just discuss. So in general, fans benefit from the new stadiums because when these new stadiums are built, it tends to be a better seating arrangement. So in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, cities, in a way to kind of try to cut back on the prices of, or the costs of new stadiums, would build these big, large, circular, multi-purpose stadiums for both football and baseball. Okay? So, in these stadiums that were being built during these times, if the city had both a baseball and football team, both would play in the stadiums. In Philadelphia, you had Veterans Stadium, which had both the Phillies and Eagles play it. Now, starting in the 90s, baseball and football teams have occupied separate facilities. But if you look at these previously built stadiums, this is kind of a cookie cutter approach where a lot of the stadiums are built in this circular fashion. And you would have, the different circles of seating. And then you would have, when it was football season, you would have football lines, or soccer for that matter. And then you would have the baseball as well. Now, you don't see them anymore, but some of the stadiums were the case to where during football season you would actually see the dirt from the baseball stadiums. Okay. So this was going on again in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, after the 80s, there was a move back towards these single-use stadiums, and it allowed each sport to find their own optimal shape and size. So the first figure here on the left shows a stadium that was built specifically for football or soccer. Now, the sections in the middle of the field were a lot closer to the players, and the number of seats in the upper zones tend to be minimized. And so if we go back here, you can see that, if you're looking at football, right in this area, you would have had a lot more, or you now have a lot more seats that are close to the players. So again, with the typical round stadium, there's only about 1/3 of the seating between the football goal lines and 2/3 in the end zone in the corners. But these are now reversed, which with more of the seatings closer to the players and less further away. And then we have baseball stadiums, which is shown in this figure. So with baseball, most of the seats are now closer to home plate with fewer in the outfield. Now, baseball, when these stadiums start to come back in these shapes and designs, it was more like the way stadiums were built in over 100 years earlier, when baseball really started to get its rise in the United States, and it was more fan-friendly for that specific sport. Now, with baseball, unlike football, yes, the size of the infield is carefully specified, but the outfield has few restrictions. And so a lot of the early stadiums during this period were designed around the particular strengths or weaknesses of a team. So that's baseball and football. Hockey and basketball teams often share facilities because the basketball courts and the hockey rinks are similar in size and shapes. The multi-purpose arenas can still serve hockey and basketball teams with fewer constraints than the others. As of the 2016-17 season, there were 17 NHL and NBA teams in the same metropolitan area, and 10 pairs of these shared an arena. Now, the main conflict when you have basketball and hockey teams in the same arena has to do with the financials. Now, in recent years, NBA teams have been the primary tenants of the arena that they share with the NHL teams, because in general, basketball tends to pull in more fans than hockey. So they would tend to reap more of the benefits of it, but it does vary from area to area. Oops, back here. More recently, the more recent construction boom when it comes to stadiums has been with soccer. So Major League Soccer, there has been a lot of construction in recent years. Now, it would seem that soccer could coexist pretty well with football because the playing surfaces are similar in shape and size, and the ideal seats are nearly identical. But with soccer, there tends to be on average smaller crowds, which tend to make the environments less vibrant in large football stadiums. So a lot of soccer fans dislike the presence of football markings on the field as well, and from the other end, damage done to the playing surfaces by football teams also made the grass surface uneven or difficult because of that, and the field was not ideal for soccer games. In 1999, the Columbus Crew opened Major League Soccer's first soccer-specific stadium, and in doing so, they actually increased their average attendance, even though the stadium could house fewer. By 2016, 8 out of 10 teams had new stadiums, and were filling them to 90% capacity. And the league's also been expanding more, and a lot of times teams will have a conditional of them going to that city, being that the city helps them to build the stadiums. And so this just shows some of the examples of the soccer-specific stadiums. And so this is kind of the before and the after. And so you can see in general, the capacity of the newer stadiums was less than the old ones, but the attendance went up in all of these, I believe. Yeah, it went up in all of them. So in that aspect, it has been beneficial for the teams. So then the question comes, do facilities create better teams? Now, team owners will, in an attempt to get cities to build these new stadiums for them, they'll claim that the increased attendance from these will allow them to field better teams. Right? So they will say, look, you build a stadium for us, we're going to get more fans, that'll give us more money, we can spend that money on players and get a better team. That has been somewhat shown in some studies, but research by some, for example, papers by Hacks, Clapp, and Quint and all, they've shown that these links are not as clear as it may seem. They show that yes, there are increases in demand, but the new stadiums do lead to higher ticket prices, and so it's not necessarily the case to where the additional revenue is overly extensive. And on top of that, when you talk about maximizing profits, yeah, you got the revenue side, but then the team also needs to spend any extra revenue in players. And in general, it hasn't been shown that just because of the new stadium, they will necessarily invest more in the talent. So overall, that's a big selling point by the owners, claiming that it will lead to more wins, which will be better for the city, better for the fans, and so forth. But in the end, it's not necessarily the case. So that's just a broad overview of the benefits of new sports stadiums to the fans.